So structures are really important, and by structure I'm referring to absolutely everything that an organisation does to deliver its purpose and vision efficiently. So that includes policies, processes, IT systems, databases, you name it. Anything that the organisation does in order to do its work efficiently, it comes under that banner of structure. And it's offset and balanced by what we talk about character or culture, which is the behavioral side of the organization, because those are two of the most important things that the leader does, is put some structure around the work and also make sure that the behaviors are appropriate to delivering on. Well, it's really, really important. And it reminds me of a conversation I had with a certain household name consultancy company that was looking at the work that they were doing. And they were talking about doing some work on structures for one of their clients. The client was a pharmaceutical company. And we were talking about them introducing a new cloud computing system. And when we talked about why are you doing that, the response that I got from fairly senior consultant in that organization was, well, it's helping them become more efficient. That's what we're doing, the cloud computing system. Why are you wanting to make them more efficient? Sounds like a dumb question, because if it's obvious, it's to make them more efficient. But when you start asking the question, why do they want to be more efficient? The answer eventually comes out, well, it's to help us with the work that we do to save lives. I think this company was involved in cancer treatment, and they want to be more efficient, so they're not having to focus their time and attention on becoming more efficient. They can actually concentrate on the work in hand. So the greater the efficiency, the greater the alignment of processes, systems, procedures to the purpose, the more they can get on with the job that they're really there to do. And the truth is, Sarah, that often organizations are their own worst enemies. They introduce a new database, a new system for collecting information on something. But guess what? Until people have got the confidence in that, they're still using the spreadsheets that they had before. So you've got data in one place and another place, and nothing's working the way that it should. And it's just about looking for those inefficiencies and improving them so that they can concentrate on the work that they're really there to do. In fact, it happened to me even before I got into consulting. So back in the 90s, as part of my career then, I ran a factory. And as part of running the factory, I was noticing that some of the staff were working overtime, and it was literally as much as 2 or 3 hours a night working overtime. And when I inquired as to what was keeping them at work doing this, they said, well, we've got all these forms to fill in. And I had a look at the forms with them. And I said, well, what happens to this information? And they said, well, we put it in an envelope, we send it to the next department, and they deal with it. So I thought, well, that's interesting, because having looked at it, I couldn't see a reason for this exercise. So I followed this information trail around 3 departments and eventually found out what happened to the information. It was filed in a filing cabinet and never ever used. And I said, look, guess what? I've spoken with the other departments. I don't think the world will change if we stop collecting this information. So we stopped collecting it. We saved 3 hours overtime from probably about half a dozen people every day. And they were happier. It was more efficient. We were able to use the budget to do other things. And, the world was a better place as a result of it. So sometimes it's the simplest things that make us inefficient. And that's why getting our structures and processes aligned to our purpose, consciously making sure we're not doing things for the sake of systems. We're doing it to deliver our purpose. Yeah, that's a really good question, Sarah. And interestingly, we've seen a progressive move for organizations to have all their labor in-house, and then things are relatively easy because you can then take a drinks mat and say, if you get all these conditions in place, the system works. But we now live in a world where organizations are much more complex. It's not untypical to see matrix structures where, for example, you get a person from one organization going to be a project manager, say, or a consultant in another organization, and they're spending nearly all their time there. And how do you make that work? Because if you allow that person to be completely subsumed into the client organization, what happens is they become estranged from the organization that's actually employing them. So they're not involved in team meetings, they're not involved in development, they don't get any say in the direction of where that organization is going. They're completely isolated. And so their personal growth is limited. They will grow because they'll learn from the work that they're doing, but they won't grow with what I call their home organization, the home team. And so there's a real simple answer to that, and that is, yeah, two of these drinks mats. And so they need to understand, and not only them, but the two organizations that they're part of need to understand, well, what's the purpose of this work? What's the purpose of the home organization? What does the vision look like to be doing effective work for this client, shall we say? What does being a good member of the home team look like? And all the way down through those different structures and conditions that make sense of all that. And as long as we do that and we share, it's effectively a contract, whether it's written or unwritten, between the client organization and the home organization. If we share that and understand that, then we lose the problems that are associated with one party wanting to have a complete monopoly on that person's time. And that same logic can apply at any scale. So if you think about people, like, for example, the work that we do at Prime East, we work with hundreds of different organizations, helping them with their leadership, with their culture change, with their learning and development. And you can imagine the chaos that we'd have if we didn't also spend time managing the team, bringing us together. You know, it's not that long since we were together over the Christmas break doing our business workshop to look at where we were going that year. Well, if people were out working all over the world, we couldn't do things like that. Yes. Yeah, so we've seen that here at Prime East, haven't we? You know, if you go back to the height of the pandemic, we were all working from home, working remotely, and now we're back in the office. But we've also kept in place a lot of those things that we learned about remote working during the pandemic, and they remain a part of what we do. So we now have what we call hybrid working, where we're in the office and we try and pick some days where a majority can be in. We have some days we close the office altogether and everybody's working from home. So it's understanding, again, coming back to prime focus and the conditions that we create. What's the purpose of our organization? Well, the purpose of our organization here at Prime East is to help our clients to deliver a better future through the work that they do. And so we have to be able to do that. And at the same time, there are purposes within the team about creating that sense of community and so on and so forth. So we put in place structures that make sense of that, because if it was just a free-for-all, it wouldn't make sense. So we do need some structure. And at the same time, one of our values at Prime East is freedom. So we have the freedom to take account of people's needs, people with families, people who might be working part-time, so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, that has to work. So you need some structure and you need some behaviors to sit around that. Well, you can see by what we've just been talking about with the pandemic, how nothing is fixed. You know, things evolve. There was a massive change. In fact, I did a piece of work with Barrett Value Centre at the time of the start of the pandemic, because we wanted to see how corporate cultures had evolved during the first few weeks of the pandemic. And we learned that cultures had shifted to the extent that would normally take about 5 or 6 years. And that was in the first 6 weeks of the pandemic. So we had to respond to the situation. And now we're having to respond to moving out of that into a new world of work. So we can see how fluid our organizations need to be in order to manage that. And part of our role in learning and development is also helping people at all levels to make sense of that. Because it's very easy if you're just having this done to you, that you could be fairly critical and say, why is the organisation doing that? Don't they care about us? Are they not providing us an office? What's the point of having an office when it's closed on Friday? Or whatever it may be. We need to have a narrative that makes sense of where we are and also where it's heading. And the opportunities and the challenges are endless, but that's part of the fun of being in business.